Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. You know how they say good fences make good neighbors? Well, in our case, not even a 7-foot privacy fence could save us from the wrath of our HOA board president, who I'll call Vegan Karen. This is the story of how one woman's crusade against our backyard BBQs turned into a neighborhood civil war, and how we ultimately came out on top. My husband and I moved into our dream home about 3 years ago. It was perfect. 4 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a beautiful deck that my husband immediately earmarked for his pride and joy, a high-end Weber grill he'd been saving up for. We were so excited to join what seemed like a friendly neighborhood. During our first week, several neighbors stopped by to welcome us with homemade treats and introduce themselves. Everyone seemed genuinely nice, except for one woman who lived 2 doors down. She didn't bring cookies or introduce herself. Instead, she handed us a 30-page printout of the HOA bylaws highlighted in various neon colors. "I'm the HOA president," she said, not even bothering to tell us her name. "Make sure you familiarize yourself with all of our rules. We run a tight ship here." That should have been our first red flag. For the first few months, everything was peaceful. We settled in, made friends with most of our neighbors, and started hosting weekend BBQs on our deck. My husband is something of a grill master and loved showing off his skills for our new friends. The smell of his famous smoked brisket or grilled ribs would waft through the neighborhood, and people would actually text us asking when dinner would be ready so they could, coincidentally, stop by. That's when the trouble started. It was a gorgeous Saturday in June when we were hosting our first big BBQ of the summer. About 20 neighbors were in our backyard. Drinks were flowing, and my husband was working his magic on the grill. Then came the aggressive knocking on our side gate. One of our guests opened it, and there stood the HOA president, looking like she was about to explode. "Do you know how offensive that smell is?" she screeched, pointing at our grill. "I'm a vegan, and you're poisoning the entire neighborhood with the smell of dead animals." The party went silent. My husband, ever the diplomat, stepped forward with a plate. "I'm sorry you feel that way. Would you like to join us? We have some grilled vegetables, and are those vegetables cooked on the same grill as the meat?" she interrupted, practically spitting the word. "Well, yes, but—" "That's disgusting," she shouted. "You're contaminating perfectly good plants with animal fat. I can smell it from my house, and it's making me physically ill." One of our neighbors tried to defuse the situation. "Come on, Linda, it's just a neighborhood BBQ. You don't have to eat anything." That's when we learned her name was Linda. But she'll always be Vegan Karen to me. Linda turned on our neighbor. "Of course you're defending them, Bill. You're part of the problem. Do you know how many animals died just so you could have your precious hamburger?" My husband, still trying to be the peacemaker, said, "Look, we're just having a friendly gathering. I understand you have different dietary preferences, and we respect that." "It's not a preference," she interrupted again. "It's a moral obligation, and that smell is a form of sensory assault." With that, she stormed out, slamming our gate so hard that the hinges bent. We tried to salvage the party, but the mood had definitely been dampened. Later, our neighbor Bill filled us in on Linda. Apparently, she'd been elected HOA president 2 years ago in a low turnout vote and had been making everyone's lives miserable ever since. She'd used the HOA bylaws to target people she didn't like, finding the most obscure rules to cite in her violation notices. "But there's nothing in the bylaws about grilling, right?" I asked. Bill shrugged. "There wasn't when I last checked, but she's been pushing to add all sorts of crazy amendments." Sure enough, 3 days later, we received an official HOA violation notice in the mail. It cited noxious odors emanating from the property causing distress to neighboring residents, and demanded we cease all outdoor cooking activities that produce offensive smells. My husband and I read through the HOA bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. There was a general clause about noxious odors, but it was clearly intended for things like trash left out too long or chemical smells, not cooking food. I called the HOA management company to contest the violation. "I'm sorry," said the representative, "but the board president insisted this falls under the noxious odor clause." "She's just one person," I argued. "Doesn't the entire board have to agree?" The representative sighed audibly. "Technically, yes, but our company just manages the property. We don't make the rules." I hung up frustrated but determined. We decided to ignore the violation and proceed with our planned 4th of July BBQ. We invited the entire neighborhood, including Linda, thinking maybe she'd see how much community these gatherings built. That was a mistake. The morning of July 4th, my husband started smoking a brisket early. Around noon, just as guests were arriving, we heard police sirens. 2 officers walked up our driveway, and right behind them was Linda, arms crossed with a smug smile on her face. "That's them, officers," she said, pointing at our grill. "They're creating a public nuisance and refusing to comply with HOA regulations." One of the officers, looking slightly embarrassed, approached us. "We received a complaint about a disturbance?" My husband explained the situation while I went inside to grab our copy of the HOA bylaws. After reviewing them, the officer turned to Linda. "Ma'am, cooking food in one's backyard doesn't constitute a public nuisance under city ordinances, and from what I can see, the HOA bylaws don't specifically prohibit BBQs. Linda was furious. "It's causing me emotional distress. The smell makes me sick. It's a violation of my rights as a vegan." The second officer stepped in. "Being vegan isn't a protected class, ma'am. Unless they're violating noise ordinances or fire codes, they're within their rights to grill on their property." I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated how far Linda was willing to go. As the police left, Linda pointed at my husband. "This isn't over. I'll make sure the HOA board passes new rules about this." For the rest of the summer, we kept getting HOA violation notices for increasingly absurd things. Our grass was a quarter-inch too tall, our mailbox was not the approved shade of black, our garden hose was visible from the street. Each time, we addressed the issue or contested it when it was clearly bogus. Then came Labor Day weekend, the last big BBQ opportunity of the summer. We decided to host one final gathering before the weather turned. We were more cautious this time, making sure everything was perfectly up to code. We even moved the grill to the far side of the yard, away from Linda's house. The party was in full swing when Linda showed up again, this time with her phone recording. She stood at our gate, filming everyone and narrating loudly. "These people are engaging in the mass consumption of animal flesh despite knowing there's a vegan in the neighborhood. This is what speciesism looks like, folks." It was annoying but harmless, so we tried to ignore her. Until my husband went to put more charcoal in the grill. As he walked past the gate with the charcoal, Linda suddenly reached through the slats and grabbed his arm, causing him to drop the hot chimney starter. Burning coals scattered across our patio, and one landed on my husband's foot. He yelled in pain as I rushed over with ice. Linda was still filming, now shouting, "Look at how dangerous these cooking implements are. They're a hazard to the entire neighborhood." That's when our neighbor Bill had enough. He walked over and stood directly in front of her camera. "Linda, he's injured because you grabbed him. That's assault. You need to leave right now." "I was defending the animals," she shouted. "He's the one committing acts of violence by cooking them." Another neighbor, who happened to be a nurse, was helping my husband with his burn while someone else called the police. By the time they arrived, Linda had retreated to her house. The officers took statements from multiple witnesses who saw Linda grab my husband. They went to her house, and though we couldn't hear the conversation, we could see her gesticulating wildly through her window. One of the officers returned to give us an update. "She's claiming she felt threatened by your husband walking near her with hot coals." "He was on our property," I protested. "She reached through the fence." "We know," the officer said. "Multiple witnesses corroborated your story. You have the option to press charges for assault." My husband, despite his painful burn, was hesitant. "I don't want to escalate things further." But I had reached my limit. "She's been harassing us for months over cooking food. Now she's physically attacked you. This has to stop." Update. It's been 6 months since I posted this story, and I wanted to provide an update because some wild things have happened since then. First off, we're still happily running our HOA with a focus on community rather than control. Our quarterly neighborhood BBQs have become a tradition, with more and more families participating each time. We always make sure to have plenty of vegan options, grilled on a separate grill. And some of our non-vegan neighbors have actually contributed amazing plant-based dishes that have become crowd favorites. But here's where it gets interesting. About 2 months ago, I got a strange email from a woman named Melissa who had just moved to Linda's vegan intentional community in Oregon. She'd heard the BBQ story from multiple residents there and wanted to know our side of it. Apparently, Linda had become something of a celebrity in her new community, telling everyone how she'd been driven from her home by meat-eating oppressors who physically threatened her for standing up for animal rights. She'd even started a small activist group called Vegetables Not Violence that was protesting local restaurants that served meat. I sent Melissa the court documents, witness statements, and even a few videos neighbors had taken during Linda's meltdowns. She was shocked, to say the least. A week later, Melissa called me with an update. She'd shared the evidence with the community's board of directors who were already having issues with Linda trying to implement restrictive rules about everything from what kind of plants people could grow to what color clothes could be worn in common areas, only earth tones that honor nature's palette. The board called a community meeting where several members confronted Linda with the evidence. According to Melissa, Linda had a complete meltdown, accusing everyone of conspiring against her and threatening to sue the entire community for vegan discrimination. The board asked her to step back from her activism roles and suggested therapy. Instead, Linda packed up and left in the middle of the night, leaving behind most of her belongings. Here's the kicker. Last weekend, we were hosting our summer BBQ when a familiar car drove slowly past our house. Yes, it was Linda, apparently doing reconnaissance. One of our neighbors spotted her and texted an alert to our neighborhood group chat. Within minutes, nearly everyone at the BBQ had positioned themselves in the front yard, waving cheerfully as Linda drove by again. She sped away and hasn't been seen since. We later learned she's moved to a different state and is apparently trying to start a vegan homesteading community where she'll have complete control over the rules. As for our neighborhood, we've never been stronger. The simplified HOA rules have actually led to people taking better care of their properties and participating more in community events. We've even started a neighborhood garden where residents can grow whatever they want, vegetables, flowers, herbs, and share with each other. My husband's famous BBQ sauce is now being sold at our local farmers market, with a portion of proceeds going to the community playground fund. And yes, he created a vegan version that's become surprisingly popular. I sometimes wonder if Linda will ever realize that her rigid approach to her beliefs is what drives people away, not the beliefs themselves. Several vegans in our neighborhood have become good friends, and they've taught us a lot about delicious plant-based cooking, though we still enjoy our BBQ. The biggest lesson I've learned from all this: communities thrive when they focus on inclusion rather than restriction, and on finding common ground rather than policing differences. That, and always check the HOA board election dates when you move into a new neighborhood. Thanks for all the supportive comments on my original post. I'll update again if Linda makes another appearance, but for now, I'm happy to report that peace and good food reign in our neighborhood. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A little bit of backstory to help explain some of the later facts. In the military, every piece of equipment gets preventative maintenance done on it to maintain it in good working condition. In the Navy, we have a very well laid out maintenance system with step-by-step instructions on how to do every bit of maintenance, with instructions so simple a monkey could do it. Part of these maintenance procedures lists required tools, parts, materials, and test equipment, and they are also extremely specific, detailing the length requirement of your screwdrivers, the brand of your gauges, etc. The management of this system the Navy uses is called the Maintenance and Material Management System, 3M, or Planned Maintenance System, PMS. After some discussion, we decided to press charges. Linda was issued a citation for simple assault and was ordered to appear in court. What we didn't expect was how quickly news would spread through the neighborhood. The next day, our doorbell rang constantly as neighbor after neighbor came by to check on my husband and express their support. Many had their own Linda stories: violation notices for holiday decorations she deemed tacky, fines for having the wrong color blinds visible from the street, even a warning to an elderly resident for using a walker that wasn't aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. "She's out of control," said one neighbor named Sarah. "The HOA election is next month. Have you thought about running?" I hadn't, but the idea took root. Meanwhile, Linda seemed to realize she'd gone too far. She sent a half-hearted apology note that still managed to blame my husband for provocatively displaying meat products in the neighborhood. The court date for the assault citation arrived, and Linda pleaded no contest. She was fined $500 and given community service, which I found darkly amusing. Would they make her serve at a steakhouse? But the real revenge was brewing in the form of the upcoming HOA election. I decided to run for president, as did 3 other neighbors who were fed up with Linda's reign of terror. Linda, of course, ran for re-election, confident in her base of supporters. The weeks leading up to the election were intense. Linda sent out inflammatory newsletters claiming I was running on a pro-animal cruelty platform. I stuck to addressing actual HOA issues: needed repairs to the community playground, better transparency in how HOA dues were spent, and a promise to stop using HOA rules to wage personal vendettas. The election had the highest turnout in neighborhood history. Almost every household cast a vote. Linda seemed shocked when she arrived at the community center to find it packed with residents. The results weren't even close. I won with 78% of the vote, and all 3 of my allied candidates were elected to the board as well. Linda received only 22%, presumably from the handful of other vegans in the neighborhood and those too afraid to defy her. In my acceptance speech, I made sure to strike a conciliatory tone. This HOA should work for everyone, regardless of their dietary choices or lifestyle. We all have the right to enjoy our homes without unreasonable interference. Linda, predictably, didn't take the loss well. She stormed out of the community center, but not before warning, "You'll regret this when the neighborhood goes to hell." My first act as HOA president was to call a special meeting to review and simplify the bylaws. We removed dozens of nitpicky rules Linda had added over the years and clarified the noxious odors clause to explicitly exclude normal cooking smells. But the sweetest victory came a month later when we hosted our first neighborhood-wide BBQ at the community park. We made sure to include plenty of vegan options, grilled on a separate vegan-only grill. Almost everyone came, including several vegetarians and vegans who admitted they'd felt Linda didn't represent them well despite sharing their dietary choice. Linda, of course, didn't attend. In fact, she put her house on the market the following week. The for sale sign went up, and within a month she was gone, reportedly moving to a vegan-friendly intentional community somewhere in Oregon. Our new neighbors who bought Linda's house, a lovely family who invited us over for their housewarming party, a BBQ, ironically enough. It's been almost a year since the BBQ battle, as our neighbors now jokingly call it. The HOA is running smoothly, violations are down 90%, and the community has never been more united. We still host regular BBQs, always with plentiful vegan options, and always with the understanding that in a community, respecting differences is the key to harmony. My husband's foot healed completely, though he likes to play up his battle scar when telling the story to new neighbors. And me? I've discovered I actually enjoy serving on the HOA board when it's focused on bringing people together rather than policing their lives. Sometimes I wonder if Linda ever realized that her crusade against our BBQs ended up bringing the entire neighborhood closer together. Probably not. But I like to think that somewhere in her vegan community she's learned that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, though she'd probably object to catching flies at all. As for us, we've never enjoyed our home more. And this weekend, you guessed it, we're having a BBQ. Everyone's invited, even vegans, especially vegans. As an electrician, we owned all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for jobs without an electrical training background, we also owned the actual equipment. So the electronics technicians with electrical training could maintain their own electrical equipment, but the cooks, culinary specialists, without an electrical background, relied on us to maintain their equipment for them. Now, if you've ever used a commercial flat-top griddle before, you know you set it to a specific temperature you want the cooktop heated to, and not a 0 to 9 inches dial like your stove at home. Part of maintaining the griddle was checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I forget how often this check was, but it wasn't a frequent check. Relatively early on when I got on board the ship, young EMFN, junior electrician, Gwen BD 94 was assigned to do this maintenance check, so I gathered all of my tools, parts, materials, etc. In doing so, I couldn't find the proper temperature sensor for our calibrated temperature gauge. We had the round-tip ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but not the flat-tip surface temperature probe for use on a griddle. I asked a different supervisor to my favorite supervisor for help, and he couldn't find it either, so we ordered a new one, and he said he'd take care of the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I let it go, and never questioned when the maintenance check disappeared from the maintenance list the next week. Meaning someone accomplished it, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And all was good. The next time this maintenance check came up due, we were on deployment, and it was again assigned to me. By this time, we had a new supervisor, and I was now EM3, slightly less junior electrician, Gwen BD 94. A bit more knowledgeable. I looked where we kept all our calibrated equipment and couldn't find the flat-top temperature probe I knew it needed, so I asked my supervisor. He found we had one on order but didn't know that we had one in the shop and told me to figure it out, knowing that was an unlawful order and would amount to lying about the check and could bite me in the ass later. I said I wouldn't do the maintenance without the right equipment, and since he couldn't lawfully order me to, we started putting a note on the check that the tools were on order and delaying it. This went on for about 2-3 months until the check was about to go red, move out of periodicity and cause negative numbers on out-maintenance reports, and I was again ordered to figure it out or I'd be written up. I refused and raised the same issue to my boss's boss, and we tore the shop apart trying to find the right equipment but couldn't find it, so he told me not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was on watch as a roving watchstander allowed to walk around the ship and even required to, after dinner one evening I saw a newer, more junior electrician, let's call him M for Timmy, even more junior than I initially was electrician, in the galley, kitchen, working on the griddle. I took a step into the galley and asked him what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was doing the maintenance check. I asked him what temperature probe he was using, and he showed me the one for the oven. I explained to him the issue and told him if he signed the maintenance check, it would be gun decking, lying on official paperwork, and he could get in trouble, but let him make his own decisions as an adult. He decided to continue doing the check. I giggled and continued on with my watch. After my watch, it was nearly 10 p.m., so I went to bed for the night, About an hour later, I got woken up, being told my supervisor needed me in the galley. I signed, figuring it was about the check, and I was going to get that earlier threatened write-up. After getting dressed and making it to the galley, the entire electrical shop was in the galley troubleshooting the griddle. You see, EMF Timmy got to the step in the PMS where it said to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial until the thermometer read the same temperature indicated by the set temperature. When he measured it, it was off by about 150 degrees, so he kept turning up the heat. Eventually, it was hot enough to melt the griddle's built-in over-temp protection device, instantly shutting the stovetop off. Turns out, he did need that temperature probe. I was tasked with helping come up with a solution to fix it because the griddle was a critical piece of equipment for the cooks, and we had no replacement parts to fix it. I asked Ian Fatimi if he ever finished the last steps of the maintenance card, turning the grill off, putting it back together, reporting completion of the PMS. He told me he hadn't. I turned to my boss and said since the maintenance check I explicitly advised against doing without the proper tools was still ongoing, and I was informed I could do the maintenance or be written up, I'd stick with my original decision and refuse to do the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during working hours, but in the meantime I was going back to bed. Have a nice night. In the morning, I did indeed get written up, but for the insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check, while my boss's boss looked on with the biggest shit-eating grin at me for holding my ground, and my supervisor was pissed at me. Turns out I was right, and we couldn't do that maintenance check without the right equipment. This remains one of my write-ups I am least ashamed to have ever gotten, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat to give a giant "I told you so" middle finger to idiot middle managers. I later found an electronic record of the counseling chit my supervisor got for tasks people with doing maintenance without the proper equipment because I laid out that this was a known issue, we didn't have the right probe for years, and threw his ass deep under the bus. Hated the guy. We got the right probe in about 6 months later. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.